We're live. Let's see. Hello, everyone. Good evening. If you're on the East Coast like I am, I'm tuning in from Brooklyn. My name is Angela. I'm on the marketing team for General Assembly New York City. Feel free to shout out where you're tuning in from as well, whether it's like the West Coast, East Coast, Central, or totally different parts of the world. So yeah, drop it in the chat. Share with us your excitement. I'm personally very excited because I don't know too much about venture capital, but we have an amazing panel on deck to share with you about their career journey getting into venture capital. And also, I just want to shout out Boss Women Collective and also WAFFA for being our event partner this evening. But yeah, welcome. I'm just going to check the chat real quick. So Rihanna is at Riverside today. Okay. Sukari is tuning in from Baltimore. Nice. Okay, Rachel's also in New York City. Sylvian's from Salt Lake City. Paulina's from SF. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And we do like to keep the chat as interactive as possible. So throughout the evening, if you have any thoughts you want to share, or even drop in your LinkedIn page so you can connect with everyone else, feel free to do so. Cool. We have a lot of SF fans, which I'm not surprised because I know Boss Women Collective originally was birthed from SF, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, SF, Los Angeles. We have a lot of people popping up.
Cool. Well, we do have lots to chat about today, and we're already at over 100 attendees. So I'm going to get started with our GA intro. So for anyone who's not familiar with General Assembly, we are a global tech and business school, and our biggest goal is to help close the global skills gap through our events, classes, and workshops. And so right now we have around 40 campuses around the world. Most of us are functioning remotely. And just in terms of some disciplinaries that we're in, some of our workshops and events are related to coding, design, data, business, marketing, career development. So example for today's event, it's very much about career development and of course, financial literacy in a way as well. And also we do a lot of programs related to uplifting underrepresented groups. So yeah, we're really excited to get the chat going today, but just some meeting norms. This event is being recorded, so you'll receive the recording at the end of the week in our follow-up email. And if you would like to share with us your screenshot or experience and excitement, feel free to tag us on Instagram at GA_New York. And Boss Women Collective and at Hey WAFFA. And then I'm going to pass it off to Rihanna to share with y'all a bit about Boss Women Collective.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hope you're all able to hear me. I'm currently on top of a hill, so fingers crossed on my Wi-Fi connection. But I'm Rihanna Singh. I'm the founder and CEO of Boss Women Collective. Pre-COVID, we hosted in real life experiences across LA, SF, and New York, and we have very excitedly pivoted to virtual experiences. And our mission is really to empower women in the early stages of their career. So a lot of what we do are focused around community conversations, events, happy hours, and workshops, really just encouraging people to level up in their personal and professional lives. Venture capital is currently the industry that I work in full-time at Angelus Ventures, focusing both on our investor side and our general partner side. So I'm really excited for this conversation. With that, I will pass it over to the WAFFA team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shilpa Kumar. I am one of the founding members of Wharton Alumni Founders and Funders Association. The mission for WAFFA is to increase the number of women-led companies that get invested in through venture capital. It's also one of the largest Wharton alumni clubs, but we've been partnering with Boss Women Collective and GA to host this event to just bring more awareness and transparency on what it actually takes to break into venture capital. And today we have handpicked some amazing women to share their personal experiences about how they broke into the industry, what their lives are actually like on a day-to-day basis, and some of their own career goals. I personally lead product marketing at Intuit QuickBooks, and I specifically lead their full fintech portfolio. So I'm not in venture capital. So a lot of these questions are mainly just for me to learn more and increase my awareness about VC. So with that, I would like each of the panelists to introduce themselves and share where they work at today. And then we'll go from there. And we'll start with Adina.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here. My name is Adina. I work at BoxGroup, which is a pre-seed and seed fund based in New York. We're a generalist fund, and I spend time focused on consumer, enterprise, and fintech.
Cool. We'll popcorn from there. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Gaby, and thank you all so much for having me. I believe I'm the youngest person on this panel, but I just joined the team at Bessember Venture Partners. We invest across all sectors from seed to pre-IPO, but I'm personally focused on early stage consumer technology.
I'll go next. Hey, everyone. I'm Monique Woodard. I'm the founding partner and managing director at Cake Ventures, which is a firm that I started. And I focus on seed stage companies focused on areas of demographic change that are changing the way that we should be investing in technology.
I can go next. My name is Erica Van. I'm an investor at Charles River Ventures. We are a multi-stage firm, but very much focused on early stage. Kind of have three separate practices that focus on three separate things. We have kind of an enterprise B2B team, a consumer team, and a bio and healthcare team. The team spread across San Francisco, Palo Alto, Boston, New York, but we invest here in the US as well as internationally. And I personally am focused on early stage B2B, and I focus very much on the East Coast.
That'll leave me. Hi, everyone. My name is Minn Kim. I am an investor at pre-seed seed stage venture firm Bloomberg Beta, where we are investing in the future of work. I spend most of my time looking at machine intelligence, future of work, and robotics. And I'm also a very proud GA alum. And so thank you, Rihanna, Shilpa, and the GA gang for bringing us all together.
Cool. Thanks so much for being on our panel today. Since we can't be in person, we'd like to do a quick, fun, rapid fire Q&A, just so we can sort of foster a little bit more personal interactions. So I'm gonna read off a series of questions, and I'd like for you guys just to shout out the first thing that comes to mind, and feel free to popcorn. Okay, so the first is, what is your go-to coffee order?
Matcha latte with soy milk.
Almond milk latte.
Exclusively tea drinker.
Light roast, full fat milk.
I'm the same as Monique.
Okay. What is one thing you're proud of that you've accomplished this year?
Doing a first close on the fund.
Nice.
Getting my first job in venture.
My first company to graduate from seed to Series A. And then personally, I finally learned how to cook, so that was nice.
Learning how to close deals fully remotely.
You know, learning how to be a dog aunt.
Favorite. What is your favorite way to practice self-care, in however way you define that?
Go outside, nature.
Pre-COVID, lots and lots of massages. Post-COVID, champagne, lots and lots of champagne.
Lots of hiking and being outside.
I get massages pre and post COVID. I don't know if that's.
I've had a couple, so you
have to find a good place, Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
Okay, what is one of your favorite things that you've eaten during this quarantine?
Ooh.
I've mastered homemade penne alla vodka, so I've been enjoying that often.
That's impressive.
I think I've become obsessed with like this tan noodle soup that this restaurant near my house makes. I love it. I would eat it every day if I could. It's between tan noodle soup or pho. I eat a lot of both of those.
I love Prince Street Pizza, which is a very specific pizza place in New York. And actually someone just posted about it in the chat, so that's really funny.
I've been exploring SF's fried chicken sandwich scene, which has been really fun. And then last, what is one work from home tip that you're comfortable sharing with everyone? I'll go first. I'm totally wearing sweatpants on the bottom.
I'm the exact opposite. I get dressed every day and like actually put on perfume, even though I'm the only person in this apartment.
I have a back pillow.
When it's possible, I try to take some calls while outside on a walk.
Like morning walks. I think that's a big one.
Yeah, waking up early for me, which I used to be pretty bad at.
Awesome, cool. Well, thank you guys for sharing. So with that, I'd love to just get into it and talk more about each of your career paths in VC. So to start off, I'd love to hear from each of you about what made you want to pursue a career in venture capital. And we'll start with Gaby first.
So for some background, I am finishing up my degree at Stanford, where I study symbolic systems, which is kind of a combination of computer science and philosophy. And it's very common to go into product management from that major. And so before my first job in venture, I was working on a product team, and I liked the job, but I felt that I was waiting for the day to end to kind of look up and see what was going on around me and meet other people and see what else was out there in the world. I just felt like there was so much I still didn't know. You know, I was so young finishing my degree, and I kind of missed the intellectual curiosity that I got from being in college, you know, taking all different classes, meeting all different people and professors. And the minute that I joined VC, I realized that has basically become my job is, you know I don't know everything, and now my job is to kind of take in as much as I can. And so for me, I knew I wanted to stay in venture because I had that same kind of intellectual curiosity that got me so excited to do my job every day.
Oh, Monique, you want to go next?
Sure. So I think I'm probably like the oldest panelist, so I've like had a lot of career experience. And like when I grew up, there was no one in my, family or like around me who was a VC. I'd never heard of VC, and so like even once I graduated from college, like I had no idea what a VC was. And so for me, I didn't really discover venture as a career path until I moved to San Francisco in 2008. And I had been like in the workforce at that point for like, 10 years or 9 years or so. And so, I kind of got to know a lot of founders, especially a lot of like Black founders, because I started this community of founders called Black Founders, and was sort of like understanding some of the challenges that underrepresented founders had as they were going out to raise money. And so at some point, I found myself like talking to founders and advising them and introducing them to the VCs that I knew. And I realized like I was doing a lot of the work of a VC without the fund behind me so that I could like make actual investments. And so I was like, okay, well, obviously, like this is what I should be doing. And then that's how I ended up deciding to move on to the VC side of the table. So it wasn't like a straight path or like something that I knew about when I graduated from college. It was a very windy path. I was an entrepreneur twice. I was in operating roles in products, and just sort of like made my way onto the VC side of the table.
Adina, do you want to go next?
Sure. For me, my first job out of college was at JP Morgan. I spent 4 years there, and my last role was investment banking, and I was covering the tech sector. I was working mostly with the Fortune 500 companies. I was traveling out to the Bay Area a ton, and that really gave me the bug for tech in a big way. And so I knew I wanted to find my way into tech. I didn't exactly know, where I wanted to land, or felt like I had the right lens into the ecosystem to sort of make the right choice for myself. And I went to business school, and originally I thought venture might be the best way to sort of get that 50,000 foot view, learn a lot about the ecosystem, to then figure out where I wanted to like hone in and land. And so ended up with an internship in venture, and along the way just fell in love with venture itself, fell in love with investing, with spending time with founders, and with the way it just satiates, I think, my intellectual curiosity, and the ability to spend time across so many different sectors is something I found super interesting. And so ended up deciding that this was the path for me.
Cool. We'll do Minn and then Erica.
Sure. Monique, I definitely can relate to some of the windiness of getting into venture, because I did not intend to nor want to. If you had asked me, like when I was an undergrad, what I was going to do after graduation, I would have said I'm going to go into academia. And so this has been a fun path into it. And so I would say that I've been in venture for about 3 years now, and I fell into it in large part driven by really like meeting people who build the cool things that we use today. And so a lot of my time before I came into venture was like going to random meetups and like doing coffee dates, like just meeting the people, like, why did you build this thing? Why did you build Meetup? And then naturally that sort of lends itself well to the day-to-day. I'll pass it to Erica.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, again, same kind of windy road as everyone getting into venture. I think from kind of just growing up, I come from multiple generations of entrepreneurs on both sides of my family. So I always kind of grew up around entrepreneurs, and I knew that I would either wind up in a job where I'd either be working with them or, I'd either be one. But I guess career-wise, so prior to venture, I was also at JP Morgan. I had a bunch of different roles, but the last job that I had there was I was able to build out a strategy org that focused a lot on emerging tech and digital innovation. I really got to build out that team, worked a lot with tech companies and worked with startups, and really loved it. So when I went back to grad school, I thought about entrepreneurship. I thought about venture. I worked with a bunch of startups while I was there. I knew I loved kind of strategy, finance, kind of ops, kind of building teams. So then I did an internship at Bessember Partners, which is a more Series B focused fund in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. Loved that. And so then after decided to pursue full-time in venture.
Okay, cool. So I think one thing that is pretty obvious to me is that the path into venture isn't very transparent. It's not like there are jobs posted at venture firms. If anything, I feel like All Raise has added more transparency to that process. So I'd love to know, what actually was that process for each of you for getting into venture? And I have some sort of like specific questions. So I'll probably start with Gaby again this time. So as someone who is a college student, like, what was really your approach to now working at Bessember?
Yeah, so for people who are similar to my age and trying to get into venture, I completely empathize with you, because I probably submitted at least 50 applications to work as an analyst at a venture firm and was rejected many, many, many times. And so I had almost kind of forgotten about that goal of mine. And so, like I said, I was working on a product team. I had taken my winter quarter off of my junior year just to kind of give a timeline. And I was working in Israel at the time, abroad, right up until the borders closed in March. right around the time that the borders had closed, I had met an investor in Israel who told me to make a Twitter account if he wanted to learn about kind of like early stage founders and investors. And I'd never used Twitter before in my life. I had no idea why he would give me that advice, but I made an account, started following some of the investors who were there. And the day that I had to go home and leave my job early when the borders had closed, I saw an application to be a summer associate at Chapter One, which is a pre-seed and seed stage fund. And so I applied literally from my phone on the plane, and I ended up getting the job. And so I had completely applied on a whim, like it was right place at the right time. I was so lucky, and I had lost my summer internship because I had left Israel to come back home during quarantine. So I was so lucky. I didn't think much of it. I just thought it was a way to spend my summer. But like I said, I fell in love with the job as soon as I started. And I just spent that summer trying to meet as many people as I could, trying to kind of get my own name out there in the early stage ecosystem, whether it was, writing about my own investment theses and thoughts, meeting with founders, helping them get connected to other early stage investors. And during the summer, the opportunity to join the team at Bessemer ended up coming up. And so, yeah, it was a very unexpected pathway and so much quicker than I had thought. It all happened basically coming from March, but it's been an amazing few months getting to kind of get acquainted with everyone else in the early stage ecosystem.
That's really interesting. I don't really hear about many people applying to venture firms, which sort of brings me to Erica. I'd love to just for you to shed some light on like what actually that process looked like for you. I mean, from the outside look, like just like knowing about you, like you have an MBA from a great school, you worked at JP Morgan. Like, what did you do to make that switch into VC?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I can talk about process. I talk about this a lot, and I think there was maybe 4 or 5 ways that I did it. And all of them actually, wow. And I'm going to talk about, I feel like internship recruiting was actually very similar to full-time recruiting. They actually weren't that difficult, or sorry, different. They were definitely difficult, but they weren't that different. So I'll talk about both. And the way that I approached it was kind of like a 360 approach. I actually did cold emails. Those actually will work. I got warm intros from other investors or, friends or portfolio companies. I also did what I call being in the field. So going to events, you can't do that now, but kind of startup events, accelerators, tech events, and just kind of networking and getting to know people there. And then lastly, intros via portfolio companies of funds. And when I look back at the process, I actually was able to secure either a full-time job or an internship in all those ways. So cold emails also worked. Like I did get an opportunity via a cold email. And when I calibrate and think about that whole process for myself, finding a job in venture and getting that role is really just being in the right place at the right time. It's finding that the investor at a fund that either just raised a new fund, so they're looking to hire people, or they just had someone similar in your level or similar in your skill sets that had just left, and they're looking to hire. And Shilpa is right, like people really don't post, like it's really network driven. But those are kind of the key things, the key ways that I approach the process. And actually all of them kind of panned out to great outcomes. So there's not one way, you just got to kind of do everything was kind of my approach. And I did do that, and it did take time. And CRV actually was an intro through a CEO of a portfolio company that I'd met. And we really hit it off, and he introduced me to the partner that was on his board. The company was Drift, which is a really great company. He introduced me to the partner who's on his board, and we just hit it off. And that's how I went about CRV.
Okay, cool. So Adina, I know that you did several internships like during business school, but then you actually had sort of an interesting path into venture. Can you share more about that experience?
Yeah, like Gaby and like Erica, my first role in venture was something that, took a lot of effort, and I pulled all the levers. I went to events, I sent cold emails, sort of all of those things that Erica touched on. Ultimately landed an internship that was supposed to last for a semester. It lasted a year and a half. And when I was in that role, there was no promise of that turning into a full-time opportunity, but I wanted to take, advantage of being there. And so I used that, venture email address as really a passport into the industry as a whole. And that was, an excuse for me to be able to build relationships with other investors in the industry, other founders, start sort of honing the skill set of being an investor, starting to build a personal brand. And that ended up being, super valuable. I graduated from business school and it was time for me to think about full-time roles. My dream job wasn't immediately obvious and available to me. And I'd learned a lot from my internship about, exactly the type of place I wanted to end up. And, I just wasn't seeing it. And getting into tech and being in an operating role was something I'd always wanted to try. And so it felt like the right moment to do that. So I actually left venture and I joined Jet.com and Walmart e-commerce. I was in a strategy and operations role and spent some time on the product side as well. And, I think what's really unique about venture is that the door never really closes, and the things that you're doing sort of outside of venture can continue to be so, incremental and additive to the ultimate goal. And so, I had built this amazing network through my internship and continued to sort of keep that warm even when I was in an operating role. And ultimately, through that network and through conversations I was having, an opportunity at BoxGroup popped up. And so things clicked and I joined about a little shy of a year after joining Jet.com. I joined BoxGroup.
Okay, cool. I know that quickly before moving on to Monique and Minn, I wanted to talk on this topic of cold emails. Can you just share what specifically are you writing in these emails? How are you incentivizing someone to make time to chat with you? And anyone can go if they have any experience.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it because I had mentioned kind of how cold emails actually can pan out sometimes. When you send a cold email, that cold email has to be very specific. So you're reaching out to a very specific person that has, maybe they're on the board or maybe have invested in a company in a space that you're interested in and that you have a thesis in, or that you have looked at companies in or might have an interesting company that you can send them that might be interesting. The farther away you are from them, so the more cold it is, you got to put a lot of time in that email for them to respond to you. So during my internship, for example, I at Bessember Partners, I'd focused on frontier tech, a lot of blockchain, AI, machine learning. And so when I had cold emailed folks, for the full time or in the full-time recruitment process, I reached out to people who were interested in AI, machine learning, or people who were interested in blockchain. And I shared kind of my theses and thoughts on the space and reached out to chat. So it can't just be, you cannot send the blast to 20 people and not custom. It's I would spend hours on these emails. They were not, easy cold emails sent to 50 people. So that's good specification, Shilpa, because you will not get a response if you get a very generic talk to me email.
Cool. So now I'd like to sort of turn attention to Monique and Minn. We've heard sort of the post-school path into venture, and I'd love to hear more about Monique, how you started your own venture firm and what that process was like. And then Minn, I'd also love for you to share a bit about your journey.
Yeah, so when I wanted to move onto the investor side of the table, it's not like I wake up one day and say I want to be a VC and then someone hires me. I still had to go out and figure out how to move on to the investor side of the table. And so I remember, I was going to a ton of events that VCs were at. And, I went up to someone who was at a very large VC firm. And I told them, so I had previously been an entrepreneur twice. I was like, I would love to be an EIR at your firm. And they were like, we don't do that. And so I got totally brushed off. And then fast forward, maybe a year later, they hired some dude as an EIR, which I think is hilarious. And then I cold emailed Kate Mitchell at Scale Venture Partners and, sent one of those cold emails that said how much I wanted to be in venture and how I was really interested in working in venture and would like to do it at scale. And I did not get to be an investor at scale. However, Kate Mitchell became the very first investor in my fund. So that kind of all turned into something at some point. But where I did end up going was 500 startups. And I had known folks at 500. I had even, sent companies to 500 before. And so had good relationships with people on the team. And one day someone reached out and they were like, well, what are you up to these days? And I went in and I talked to Dave and Christine, who were the founding partners of 500. And at some point they said, oh, you should come invest here. And so I joined 500 Startups as a venture partner on their seed team. I was their first Black venture partner. And then I also opened up their sub-Saharan Africa deal flow and relationships there too. So that's kind of how I ended up officially in venture. And then I decided to leave 500 in 2018 and then decided I needed a checkbook to write deals out of. And Jeremy Liu over at Lightspeed, we knew each other, and he asked me if I would want to come scout while I figured out what I was going to do next. And so I said yes. And then eventually I launched Cake Ventures. So that was kind of the path.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's not at all a linear path.
Not at all.
Which is, and you picked one of the best names, Cake Ventures. Amazing. I mean, to be honest, I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome here because I feel like I kind of, stumbled into the job a bit. And so I can at least share my story about how I did end up in venture. And it kind of mostly started with I really wanted to move to San Francisco. And so I was in New York. I'm born, I was raised on the East Coast, went to school in Pennsylvania, lived in New York for a while, and all of my favorite companies and all of my favorite products were headquartered in San Francisco. And so I figured okay, well, that seems to be where the action is. And so I guess I have to go there. And about 3-4 years ago, my dream job was to go work at Twitter. That was the goal. And actually for me in that process, I ended up getting to know my now current team, Roy, Karen, James at Bloomberg Beta, with whom I had crossed paths in my previous role, but didn't really get to know. And so I spent about a year getting to know them and how they work, how what they do, what they like about the work that they do. And I think I was picking up a little bit on what Erica said, where you said you reached out cold. And I think one of the things that might be helpful for the audience who's listening is one of the best advocates, if you are interested in going into venture, will be founders that those investors have backed. Founders writ large, but founders in particular that they have backed. If they, if the CEO of Drift is oh my God, Erica's awesome. You have to get to know this person. They're totally going to take the meeting or at least answer your email at the very least. And then the other thing I'll mention is I don't know if I would have loved or thrived in the job that I have now if it were a different stage. And I think that's important. And Shilpa, we might get to that later in the conversation, but Gaby and Erica, you're both at multi-stage firms. And it sounds like Monique, Adina, and I are kind of at the earliest stages of backing an entrepreneur. And I think that quite dramatically changes the nature of the job and how you work. And so for me, I am really, I love working with founders at the very beginnings of their journeys, and where a lot of the times it's not really a company, it's a person with an idea and dreams. And so I'll say that I think my reflections on the job would be very different if it had been at a later stage.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, that's where I was planning to go next. So can you just share about like some of the differences between the different stages and sort of like what a typical day or week in the life looks like? And maybe we can start with like rewinding to a year ago, so like pre-pandemic, and what that looks like today too. So who wants to go first? We'll just popcorn. Let's start with Monique.
Sure. So pre-pandemic, this week I was in Moscow meeting founders and and helping the 500 Startups Moscow program. And obviously now we can't travel. So I would not be doing that. Pre-pandemic, I traveled a lot to meet founders, meeting LPs, limited partners who are investors in funds. And I was on planes a very significant amount of my time. When I wasn't on planes and when I was in the Bay Area, I would spend most of my time meeting up with founders at coffee shops, taking meetings, and like, meeting people one-on-one in person. Today is a lot different. Obviously, I haven't traveled since right after Moscow. And so that's a significant change. And now all of my investing happens via Zoom. Also, all of my pitches to LPs happen via Zoom. So those have both been sort of challenging to figure out how to manage, but we're like 9 months in or 8 months in or something. So I've been able to kind of adapt, and it's been great. I think just in general, I think this will democratize access to capital for people who are not in the Bay Area or on the coast in, the Bay Area, Boston, New York, places like that. So I think generally that the switch to being able to meet people via Zoom is a positive change for the industry. And I've definitely seen it increase deal pace and just the sheer number of deals and meetings that you can take. It's almost overwhelming in a good way.
Cool. Who wants to go next? Just sort of shedding light on like what the different stages look like.
I mean, I will leave it to Gaby and Erica to answer about the later stuff, but the earlier you are, it is probably a little bit more, well, there's a couple of things I'll highlight. The distribution between like how reactive and versus how proactive you can be in the job is quite different. And so all of us on this panel like spend a lot of our time like meeting with entrepreneurs and people founding companies. But I would say that the earlier you go, the more reactive in some ways you have to be in the job. Insofar as like, in some ways, when you're a very early stage investor like myself, your N of the number of people who might be starting companies is infinite. It could be literally anyone. And so that it poses a different kind of challenge versus the other side, where the later you are, your N is in some ways like finite, because you are trying to invest more money into companies that presumably have raised money already. And so I think that is a big difference. And then the other part that I'll mention is just like the pace. And so for us, like at Bloomberg Beta, we invest like 2 companies a month, roughly, so we're doing like 24 some odd companies a year. That's very different than if you're a typical like Series A investor or Series B investor, where you're writing much bigger checks, lots more zeros, in far fewer companies. And so, I don't know, I'll pass it off to Gaby. It's what's your experience been like so far?
Yeah, Minn.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Shilpa.
Oh, go ahead, Gabby. I'll ask a follow-up question later.
Okay, yeah, Min, you hit the nail on the head with being reactive versus proactive. And as I said earlier, I actually right now have more experience at the pre-seed and seed stage when I was at chapter 1, and I only very recently joined Bessemer. And so I've been kind of learning that process of being reactive versus proactive over the past month, moving into the later stages. I definitely would say the biggest aspect of the job is there's more data to deal with in general. And so I'm much more analytical when I'm talking to companies. So at the pre-seed and seed stage, it was much more, do I connect with this founder? Am I excited by the vision? Do I think there's a really big opportunity here? And I guess kind of there's just more math and more analysis I can do at the later stages. Like, how does this actually look? And like, what do the projections actually look like? And then, like you said, also the pace is much slower. And so when I was at chapter 1, we would often meet a company and decide on an investment within 24 to 48 hours, just because venture is very competitive right now. And a lot of deals at those early stages are being done. And so we would kind of meet a company, it would move very quickly, and then we would move on to the next. So there was a lot of context switching. And now much fewer deals are done just because, like you said, the checks are bigger. But for someone in an entry level role like myself, and I think, yeah, I'm the only person on this panel who's in one of those entry level roles, my main job is just sourcing deals. And so I have to be much more proactive about where I'm looking to find those companies and if they're at the correct stage and if they have enough traction to be a fit for the fund. So it's been an interesting process just for me to kind of make that own switch in my career.
Okay. So the next thing that I'm really curious about is like, what does success look like in this role? And can you just talk about like what you think about when you think about like career advancement in venture? Is this the path that you want to stay on, or are you hoping to graduate to something else?
Happy to jump in. And I think this is gonna, this looks different at many different firms. For me at BoxGroup, we take a very collaborative, team-oriented approach to the work that we do. And so, there are some firms where success is around sourcing a certain number of companies or making a certain number of investments. And, I think about success in my role as being slightly different. It's, am I sourcing opportunities that benefit, the broader group? I don't spend a lot of time in healthcare, but if I find a healthcare opportunity, am I directing that in the right way and channeling it to the right person on our team? Am I using my network to help our portfolio companies, whether or not it was a company that I myself directly sourced or worked with? Am I using my network to help them hire, to make interesting customer intros? And then, similarly, am I, doing the analytical work and thinking and thesis building that again sort of contributes to everyone as a whole. And so it's a little less metric oriented for me and more about really being a team player and trying to approach venture as a team sport, which I think is a little bit of a different approach. It can often be a very individual job and sport, if you will.
I'll jump in. I mean, I'm a fund manager, so this is basically what I'm going to be doing for as long as I'm allowed to do it, AKA the rest of my life, the rest of my professional career. So a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis and what I will do on a day-to-day basis looks a lot like what an entrepreneur does in some cases, because I do have to build the firm and the fund. And that means being able to hire other investors, being able to, set up processes, handle the operations side of the fund itself. So when it comes to that, it's like, I'm also looking, I'm starting with fund 1, but also thinking and looking 2, 3, 4 funds out and understanding what that needs to look like and who are the relationships that I need to be building with LPs who aren't going to be in fund 1, but might be in fund 4. Right. And so there's a little bit of like long-term thinking that I have to do around just the way that I have to build this firm. And then there's the shorter term, needing to meet entrepreneurs and, hopefully get them to let me invest in their fund, in their company, because, I am hoping to invest in companies that become like the next, big category changing businesses. And so for me, there's like a little bit of like balancing there, and thinking long term about my career as a VC, because this is more than likely the last thing that I will do. And eventually, I'll have to plan for the succession of my firm.
I know, Minn, you just got promoted. Congratulations. What was that process like for you? How did that happen?
Thank you. So I'll caveat that promotions look very different. Career development, it varies quite dramatically by firm by firm. So for example, at a firm like I think CRV or Bessember, or like, you may have heard of like Sequoia or Andreessen. These are larger firms typically that have a more like standardized, I guess, path of like there's an entry level and then you do good work and then there's like a path forward, upward rather. It was a little bit different, I think, at many like smaller firms where it is like a looser structure, and we have an investment team of 6 and a total full-time team of 8, which is fairly lean, small but mighty, as I like to call it. My sense of promotion was really just I had taken on a lot more responsibility internally on the team, both in terms of investment decision making and sourcing investments and working with founders as part of portfolio support. We don't actively take board seats, especially because at the stage that we invest, there's no board. It's like us and them. And so it is quite hands-on to the extent that we are able. And so my promotion was an interesting path of like, we'd never had one before. So, which is kind of exciting. And I feel really lucky that I get to continue to work with my team and that they were really receptive about making that a possibility for me. It wasn't something that we'd done. And in some ways, like, because we're fairly like flat, we're a bit allergic to titles. And my counter was, well, we want to set an example for the firm that we are continuing to grow.
That's awesome. So I just have 2 more questions before we open it up to Q&A. The first is, so this is quite a diverse panel. If only like all VC boards look like this. And part of the reason WAFFA was founded was because of the lack of funding that goes towards women. And so I'm curious, like, how are each of you trying to change that narrative, or what is your company doing? I know that, it's oftentimes based on your network, and so that can be pretty biased. And so how are you democratizing access to capital? Who wants to go first?
I can start. So a mentor of mine at Bessemer, her name is Talia. She's a partner, and I was asking her kind of one of those similar questions, like, as the only female partner right now at the fund, how do you view your job? How do you, try and make a difference without almost saying like, I'm the only female partner at the fund, and so now I'm officially like the diversity representative. Like, that should not be the job of women in VC or any diverse members of VC. Like, the job is to do your job and then also to uplift the others around you. And so she told me something that was very interesting. She said, first of all, half of her portfolio is female founders. And she said that the female founders in Bessemer's portfolio just have such successful companies because they have to be that much better than everyone else around them in order to like be recognized for the work that they've done. So that kind of stuck with me. And I think as a young person in VC, I am trying to be as intentional as I can about setting the tone for my own career, where I'm going to meet with as many female founders as I can, and I'm going to try and uplift as many female founders as I can, because if I don't do that from the get-go, there's no way I'll be able to even get close to having gender parity in my own portfolio when I get old enough in my career to have one of my own. So I just try and be very intentional about it, and especially have those conversations. And I think it's amazing that we even get to have panels like this and have these discussions. But I do think it's, ongoing work that needs to be done.
I can chime in. I mean, this is something, especially this year, I feel like this has been top of mind in a way that it hasn't been for like everyone. And I'm really happy that, you asked this, Shilpa. In some ways, like at our team, we've taken a couple different lenses to it. One of which is like there's backing diverse entrepreneurs, and diverse can come in like a variety of shapes and forms, right? One of which is like gender, there's like orientation, and then one that I personally care a lot about is like socioeconomic diversity. And so it's not just the people that went to like great schools on the coast, right? How do you like help enable communities beyond just like New York, LA, San Francisco, and Chicago, or Boston, or wherever? And to that end, I guess like our team, we've backed like new fund managers like Monique, not you specifically, but like new fund managers who have like a unique theme or thesis based on like their areas of expertise, whether it is topical or geographic or focused on like backing female founders, for example, or people of color. And so that's like one initiative that we've spent several years working on. And we've like, I don't know, we have this whole thing called Comeback Cities, and we go to different startup regions across the country, and we try to partner with local investors and local entrepreneurial communities to understand like what is it that they actually need. Because I think it would be like a little bit righteous of us to say we know exactly what works in the Bay Area will work everywhere else.
Totally. So in the interest of time, unless someone else has any more thoughts to share, I'm going to move on to the last question before Q&A. Okay, cool. So I guess knowing what you know today and sort of like the challenges that are faced in VC when it comes to representing like diverse founders, and even just like operating in this pandemic, it's kind of a loaded question. What advice would you give to like your younger self, or what do you wish you had known when you were recruiting for a venture capital role? I can see everyone thinking right now. Yeah, I guess to just put it more simply, do you have any advice for those trying to break into VC, like amid the pandemic and like everything that's happening? Like, what are the best ways to get in touch with partners at different firms, or to find out about cool companies? Like,
I think, listening to everyone's story tonight and, how we all got into VC, I think the commonality is that it didn't happen overnight. It was a long and winding path. And so I think, my advice would be, if this is something that you're interested in and excited about, understand that you're, signing up for potentially a long search, and don't be discouraged by that, and know that there are so many things that you can do from your seat, wherever that is, to sort of start taking on the role of venture investor. I always say that the three main activities that we all do are sourcing great companies, picking great companies, and then, actually earning the right to invest in those companies. And there are things that you guys can all do to start building those muscles, whether that's, building your personal brand, building your network in an interesting way. And so, start doing those things and get ready for a long but rewarding journey.
I think one thing that I did that was really helpful, and this stemmed from my work during my internship, but I had a few areas that I was really excited about and loved and had built networks in, and kind of built theses and short decks around those areas. So an investment thesis is kind of a very broad general thesis about a market, about where you should invest, how you should invest, the type of founders you should invest in. And it's like a lens that you should look at a market. And I built a few of those and had relationships with founders in those areas. And I knew when they were raising capital, kind of knew how the businesses were doing. And when I had conversations with VCs, I was able to share kind of that deal flow as well as those theses and thoughts on the market. And that was very, very helpful because, well, yeah, I'll stop there.
With that, I'm gonna hand it off to Rihanna to run our Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing. I know we're short on time, so I'm just gonna run through, I think we have time for about 4 quick fire questions. So the first one is from Anonymous. Can you share your stories of how you were able to refine your skills, financial modeling and deal structuring? Any tips, resources, or just general advice for someone pivoting from a different career world? So I'll open up to anyone who wants a popcorn with a response.
I think as an early stage investor, specifically seed, pre-seed, pre-A, whatever we're calling that zone, the more deals you see, the better you get at it, right? And so honestly, I think that the thing that helps seed investors get good at what they do is seeing a large volume of deals. And so I think the fact that I started at 500 startups was a really good thing because the sheer volume meant that I was looking at hundreds of startups every few months, right? And so, and having them in and interviewing and evaluating at such a rapid clip that I was able to like very quickly and clearly understand where a founder and their company were in their trajectory and what needed to happen for them to be successful, and sort of evaluate likelihood of success based on being able to quickly benchmark against other companies that I had seen before. So I think if you're thinking about the earliest stages, volume helps. And then the second thing I think is really important is, again, and Erica mentioned this perfectly, really refining your own thesis around how to think about companies and how to think about market opportunities. The financial modeling you can learn early stage, seed, there isn't a ton of it because there isn't a ton of data that you're dealing with. And so you need it a lot less early than you do, at later stages. But those skills can be learned. I think that, it's getting the reps in and having enough volume so that you're able to really see a number of companies and evaluate them against each other in some cases.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Next question from Tina. What are skills and actions that make you an effective VC and asset to the companies that you work for and with? What can be done to develop those skills today?
Okay, I'm going to be super crude about how this works for those of you who are really interested in getting into venture. Like, venture firms will hire you and founders will want to work with you for the same reasons. And it's one of 3 things broadly. This is crude, but like, it's either that you are a node of people. And so you are like the curator or like the middle and the thick of like a bunch of communities or whatever. And people trust you. People trust you that you are a good curator of people. That's 1. 2 is you have insights. And I think that's the reason for why I think a lot of like people in tech will encourage you to write, because you are like thinking out loud, and that's not for everybody. Like, if that feels like a huge labor, it's not for everybody, but like for those who do, it's like a really great way to scale how you share what you know. And the third thing is like prestige, right? And so this might be less relevant if you're a little bit earlier in your career, but like, that's why, like the former CEO of some like bajillion-dollar company gets hired as a venture partner at some venture firm, because like they are like a magnet for like really talented people who want to know how he or she made it big, blah, blah, blah. But like, those are kind of the 3 big things. And that's the same thing that you bring to both your teammates at a venture firm and also to founders. And so whatever ways that you want to work towards building into that. And they're not mutually exclusive, but certainly like it's the thing that sets you apart if you can excel at any one of those three things.
I love that. Thank you for sharing all of the 3 tactical tips. Last one is any must-read industry newsletters and must-listen to industry podcasts. I know we're about time, so if you want to drop them in the chat, that works as well. And with that, I will pass it over to Shilpa.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much for participating on our panel. This barely even scratched the surface of the topics we wanted to cover today, but there is clearly so much to be learned, and there's so many differences in this space. So when you're thinking about a career in venture, hopefully this gave you some food for thought. And with that, we hope to stay in touch. Please follow each of us at our handles, Boston Collective, Hey WAFFA. And our panelists have also included their handles here as well if you want to stay in touch. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, Rihanna. Thanks, Shilpa.